Savannah, Georgia, 1911. The Spanish moss hung like grey beards from the oak trees lining Abercorn Street. Catherine Romero stood at her bedroom window watching the afternoon light filter through the dense canopy. The grand houses of the historic district loomed with quiet dignity, but none quite matched the imposing presence of the Romero mansion. Built in 1856 by her grandfather, Eduardo Romero, the house stood as a testament to old money and older secrets. Catherine's gaze drifted to the garden, where her sisters, Elizabeth, Margaret, and little Josephine, played beneath the watchful eye of their mother, Eliza. At 22, Catherine was the eldest of the Romero daughters, and the only one who remembered the night their father disappeared. The sound of carriage wheels on cobblestone drew her attention to the street. A black brougham, pulled by two matching Frisians, came to a stop at their gate. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as a tall figure emerged. Even from a distance, she recognized him immediately. Vincent Hargrove, their father's business partner and their godfather. "Catherine!" her mother's voice called from downstairs. "Come down, darling. Mr. Hargrove has arrived." Catherine's fingers tightened around the lace curtain. Vincent Hargrove had been a constant presence in their lives, especially after their father vanished 7 years ago. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone, he was there, bearing gifts, and that strange, sad smile that never quite reached his eyes. She descended the staircase slowly, her hand trailing along the polished banister. In the foyer, Vincent stood removing his gloves, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the marble floor. At 45, he remained a handsome man, his dark hair now streaked with silver at the temples, his eyes the color of wet slate. "Ah, there she is," he said, his gaze finding Catherine, "the eldest Romero daughter, more beautiful each time I see her." Catherine forced a smile. "Mr. Hargrove, what a pleasant surprise. No need for formalities, my dear. Uncle Vincent has always sufficed." But he wasn't their uncle. Catherine had always found it strange how her mother insisted on maintaining the fiction of familial connection. "I've come with news," Vincent said, turning to Eliza, "and to discuss Josephine's upcoming baptism." Catherine watched her mother's face pale slightly. Josephine, at 4 years old, was long overdue for her christening. Eliza had postponed it repeatedly, citing the child's delicate health. "Perhaps we should speak in the study," Eliza suggested, her voice tense. As they disappeared down the hall, Catherine remained in the foyer, a familiar unease settling in her stomach. There was something about Josephine's baptism that frightened her mother. The same thing, Catherine suspected, that had occurred before her own baptism and those of Elizabeth and Margaret. Through the half-open door of the study, she caught fragments of their conversation. "The agreement cannot be delayed any longer. She's just a child, Vincent. Your husband knew the terms when he made the pact." Catherine moved closer, careful to avoid the creaking floorboard near the study door. "4 daughters," Vincent was saying, his voice low but clear. 4 baptisms, 4 claims. The last one completes the circle." "And what then?" Eliza asked, her voice breaking. "Then your debt is paid, and the Romero name continues. Isn't that what Eduardo wanted? What Thomas sacrificed himself for?" Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. Her father hadn't disappeared. He had sacrificed himself. But for what? And what did Vincent Hargrove have to do with it? As she stood frozen in the hallway, little Josephine's laughter floated in from the garden, innocent and oblivious to the darkness that seemed to have claimed each Romero daughter at her baptism. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. Vincent Hargrove was staying in the guest room, a rare occurrence that had set the entire household on edge. She lit a candle and made her way to the family library, determined to find answers. The Romero library was extensive, filled with leather-bound volumes collected over generations. Catherine headed for the glass cabinet where her father kept his private journals. Thomas Romero had been meticulous about recording family business, a habit Catherine had always admired. The cabinet was locked, but Catherine knew where her mother kept the key. Inside, a hollow book on the third shelf, a collection of Tennyson's poems. With trembling fingers she retrieved it and opened the cabinet. Her father's journals were arranged chronologically. She pulled out the volume from 1896, the year before her baptism. The leather was cracked with age, and the pages smelled of tobacco and ink, her father's scent. Catherine settled into a wing-back chair and began to read. April 18th, 1896. V.H. visited today. Reminded me of grandfather's arrangement. The first baptism approaches. Eliza is beside herself, but what choice do we have? The business would collapse without his investment, and the Romero name would be ruined. One daughter is a small price to pay for generations of prosperity. Still, when I look at little Catherine, I wonder if any fortune is worth this bargain. Catherine's heart pounded against her ribs. She flipped through more pages, scanning for mentions of Vincent Hargrove or baptisms. June 3rd, 1896. Catherine's baptism is set for Sunday. V.H. will stand as godfather, as was agreed. The claim will be made when she turns 25. 3 years. That's all we have left with her. The candle flickered as Catherine gasped. 25. She would turn 25 in 3 months. What did the claim mean? She searched for more entries, finally finding one from the night her father disappeared. November 12th, 1904. I've found a loophole. There might be a way to save the girls, but it requires sacrifice. If I offer myself in their place, V.H. might agree to release them from the pact. Eliza doesn't know. It's better this way. If I don't return, tell my daughters I loved them more than any earthly possession or name. The journal slipped from Catherine's hands, landing with a dull thud on the carpet. Her father had sacrificed himself to save them. But from what? What was this claim that Vincent Hargrove had on the Romero daughters? You shouldn't be reading that. Catherine whirled around. Vincent stood in the doorway, his tall figure silhouetted against the dimly lit hallway. He wore a dressing gown of deep burgundy, his silver-streaked hair loose around his shoulders. "What did you do to my father?" Catherine demanded, rising to her feet. Vincent stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I didn't do anything to Thomas. He made his choice, just as your grandfather made his before him." "What choice? What bargain?" Vincent's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Your grandfather was facing ruin. The Civil War had devastated his shipping business. He needed capital and protection. I offered both. In exchange for what? A claim on his female descendants. A daughter from each generation to be claimed on her 25th birthday. Vincent moved closer, his shadow stretching across the floor. Your father tried to break the pact. He offered himself instead, but some substitutions aren't equivalent. Catherine backed away until she felt the bookshelf behind her. What happens when you claim someone? Vincent smiled, but it was a cold expression, devoid of warmth. You'll find out soon enough, Catherine. Your birthday is coming, isn't it? September 21st. And my sisters. What about them? The pact requires 4 claims from your generation. Your father produced 4 daughters, quite convenient. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from Catherine's face. Though I must admit, I've always had a particular interest in you. Catherine recoiled from his touch. I won't let you harm my sisters. Harm? Vincent laughed softly. My dear, being claimed isn't about harm. It's about belonging, about fulfilling a purpose greater than this mundane existence. As he spoke, Catherine noticed something strange about his eyes. In the flickering candlelight, they seemed to shift, the pupils elongating like those of a cat. What are you? She whispered. Vincent's smile widened, revealing teeth that suddenly seemed too sharp. I'm a businessman, Catherine. Just like your father and grandfather, I simply deal in different commodities. The following morning, Catherine found her mother in the garden, pruning roses with shaking hands. The children were at their lessons with Miss Abernathy, the governess, giving Catherine the privacy she needed. You knew, Catherine said without preamble. About the pact, about what happens when we turn 25. Eliza's pruning shears clattered to the ground. She looked older suddenly, the lines around her eyes more pronounced. Who told you? I read Father's journals. And I spoke with Vincent. Catherine sat beside her mother on the stone bench. What is he, Mother? What happens when he claims us? Eliza's hands twisted in her lap, pale and veined like alabaster. I don't know exactly. Your grandfather made the arrangement before I married into the family. All I know is that each daughter, at 25, goes away with Vincent. They never return. And you allowed this? Catherine couldn't keep the accusation from her voice. What choice did I have? Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Your father tried to break the pact. He disappeared that night, trying to save you girls. And still, Vincent comes for his claim. Catherine thought of her sisters, Elizabeth, who at 19 was already being courted by the son of a prominent judge. Margaret, 15 and passionate about medicine, dreaming of becoming a doctor despite society's constraints. And little Josephine, only 4, with her curls and dimpled smile. There must be a way to stop this, Catherine insisted. Eliza shook her head. Your father thought so too. Look what happened to him. Then we'll leave. Take the girls and go somewhere he can't find us. He always finds the Romero daughters, Eliza whispered. It's part of the pact. No matter where you go, when your 25th birthday arrives, he'll be there to make his claim. Catherine stood up, pacing between the rose bushes. Then we need to understand exactly what this pact entails. There must be terms, conditions, loopholes. The original document would be in your grandfather's papers, Eliza said, but those are kept in the bank vault. Then we'll go to the bank, today. Eliza looked fearful. Vincent watches the house, he'll know. Then we'll need a distraction. Catherine's mind raced. The baptism planning. Tell him you need his help with the arrangements for Josephine's ceremony. That will keep him occupied while I go to the bank. For the first time, a spark of hope appeared in Eliza's eyes. It might work. He's always been particular about the baptism details. Catherine squeezed her mother's hand. We have to try for Elizabeth, Margaret, and Josephine, and for me. Later that morning, Catherine slipped out the side door while Vincent was occupied in the parlor with Eliza, discussing the arrangements for Josephine's baptism. She wore a plain dress and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed her face, hoping to avoid recognition. The First National Bank of Savannah stood on Bull Street, its columned facade imposing in the midday sun. Catherine entered, grateful for the cool interior after the humid walk. Mr. Hadley, the bank manager, recognized her immediately. Miss Romero, what a pleasant surprise. How may I assist you today? I need access to my grandfather's papers, Catherine said, keeping her voice steady. The family documents in our vault. Mr. Hadley's smile faltered. I see. Do you have authorization from your mother or Mr. Hargrove? Catherine stiffened. Mr. Hargrove. Why would his authorization be required for my family's documents? Well, miss, since your father's absence, Mr. Hargrove has been listed as a custodian of the Romero accounts and holdings. Hadley adjusted his spectacles nervously. Standard procedure for a business partner to assume such responsibilities. I see, Catherine forced a smile. Actually, I'm here on Mr. Hargrove's behalf. He's currently at our home, planning my sister's baptism, and asked me to retrieve some documents. Hadley hesitated. I would need written authorization. Of course, Catherine interrupted, opening her handbag. She produced a folded note, blank but sealed with wax, bearing the impression of her father's signet ring, which she'd taken from her mother's jewelry box. Will this suffice? Hadley examined the seal, nodding slowly. Very well, Miss Romero. Please follow me. The vault was in the basement, a massive steel door guarded by an attendant. Inside, private boxes lined the walls. Hadley led her to a large drawer marked Romero. I'll leave you to your business, he said. Ring the bell when you're finished. Alone with the family documents, Catherine worked quickly. Her grandfather's papers were organized chronologically, and she soon found a leather portfolio dated 1856. the year the mansion was built. Inside was a document written on parchment. The ink faded to brown. The language was archaic and formal, but the terms were clear enough. In exchange for financial salvation and protection in perpetuity, I, Eduardo Romero, do hereby pledge to Vincent Hargrove and his line the following consideration. One female descendant from each generation of Romero daughters to be claimed upon her 25th year of life, following proper baptism in the faith. Said claim to be exercised by Vincent Hargrove or his designated heir, with the claimed daughter to serve in his household for a period not less than natural life. This covenant to continue until such time as 4 daughters from a single generation have been claimed, thus completing the circle and satisfying the debt in full. Catherine's hands trembled as she read the final lines. This pact is sealed in blood and cannot be broken except by mutual consent or by the complete extinction of either bloodline. Any attempt to violate these terms will result in immediate forfeiture of all protection and assets secured by this arrangement. There it was, the terrible bargain her grandfather had made. 4 daughters from a single generation would complete the pact. Her father had produced exactly 4 daughters, meaning that after Josephine, the debt would be paid. But what did it mean to serve in his household? And why did Vincent Hargrove, who looked no older than 45, speak of a pact made in 1856, 55 years ago? Catherine carefully refolded the document and placed it in her handbag. As she prepared to leave, something else caught her eye. A small leather-bound book wedged at the back of the drawer. She pulled it out and saw her father's handwriting on the cover. Research and Findings. She took that too. Back at the Romero mansion, Catherine slipped in through the kitchen door, nodding to Bertha, their cook, who gave her a knowing look, but said nothing. The house was quiet. Vincent had apparently gone out, and Eliza had taken the younger girls to their piano lessons. Catherine hurried to her room and locked the door. She spread the documents on her bed and opened her father's research journal. The first entries dated back to 1902, 2 years before his disappearance. January 15th, 1902. I've begun investigating VH's background. The man claims to have been my father's business partner since 1856, yet he appears no older than 40. Either he is lying about his involvement with my father, or something unnatural is at work. March 3rd, 1902. Found references to a Vincent Hargrove in Savannah, records dating back to 1820. Same description, tall, dark-haired, grey eyes. Impossible, unless he is much older than he appears. July 17th, 1902. Visited New Orleans. Met with a woman known for her knowledge of the old ways. She recognized VH's description immediately, called him one of the hungry ones. Said they make pacts with families, feeding on their essence over generations. The baptism is key, it marks the girls as his. October 30th, 1903. The woman in New Orleans sent a package. Contents: silver dagger, vial of blessed oil, instructions for breaking a blood pact. She warns the price is high. Must consider carefully. February 14th, 1904. Elizabeth's baptism approaches. VH insists on being Godfather again. I've decided to act before he can claim Catherine. The ritual requires the blood of the pact maker or a direct descendant. I will offer myself in place of my daughters. The final entry was dated November 12th, 1904, the night Thomas Romero disappeared. Tonight I confront VH with what I know. The silver dagger is hidden in my boot, the blessed oil in my pocket. If you're reading this, Eliza, know that I love you and our girls more than life itself. If I succeed, the pact will be broken. If I fail, look in the hollow beneath the library floor, under the eastern bookcase. There you'll find everything you need. Catherine closed the journal, her heart racing. Her father had discovered what Vincent Hargrove truly was, some kind of creature that fed on human essence, using the baptism ritual to mark his prey. And he had found a way to break the pact, though it had cost him his life. There was a gentle knock at her door. "Catherine, are you there?" It was Elizabeth, her voice hushed. Catherine quickly gathered the documents and hid them under her mattress before opening the door. Elizabeth stood in the hallway, her face pale. "What's wrong?" Catherine asked. "Mr. Hargrove has scheduled Josephine's baptism for this Sunday," Elizabeth whispered. "Mother is beside herself. And he's been asking for you. Sunday, just 3 days away, and her own 25th birthday was barely 3 months after that. Where is he now?" "In Father's study. He's been going through his papers." Catherine's blood ran cold. If Vincent discovered that she knew about the pact or about her father's research. "Listen to me carefully," Catherine said, pulling Elizabeth into her room and closing the door. "I need you to pack a small bag for each of the girls. Nothing obvious, just essentials that won't be missed. Tell no one." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "Are we going somewhere?" "Possibly. I need to check something first." Catherine thought of her father's final journal entry. "The hollow beneath the library floor, under the eastern bookcase." "What?" "Nothing. Just be ready, in case we need to leave quickly." After Elizabeth left, Catherine waited until the house grew quiet for afternoon rest. Then she made her way to the library, careful to avoid the creaking floorboards. The eastern bookcase was the largest, filled with encyclopedias and scientific texts. She ran her fingers along the base, feeling for any irregularity. There, a section of the baseboard that seemed looser than the rest. Catherine pressed it, and with a soft click, a panel swung open, revealing a small compartment beneath the floor. Inside was a wooden box, about the size of a cigar case. She removed it and carefully opened the lid. Inside lay a silver dagger, its blade etched with strange symbols, and a small glass vial containing amber oil. Beneath these was a folded paper with instructions written in her father's hand. "The pact can be broken by the blood of the maker or a direct descendant freely given. The blessed oil must anoint the blade. The cut must be made over the original pact document with these words spoken. By blood it was sealed, by blood it is broken. I release you from your claim, I sever our bond. But beware, he will sense the attempt. He will fight, and if you fail, the consequences will be dire for all who bear the Romero name." Catherine closed her eyes, understanding at last what her father had attempted and why he had failed. Vincent Hargrove had overpowered him, perhaps killed him. But Thomas Romero had been alone. Catherine had her mother and sisters. Together, perhaps they stood a chance. She carefully replaced the box and closed the hidden compartment. As she stood, a shadow fell across the room. "Finding anything interesting, Catherine?" Vincent Hargrove stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the exit. His grey eyes were cold, calculating. "Just some reading," Catherine said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Vincent stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over the bookcase she had just moved away from. "Your father was a great reader too," he said softly, "always searching for knowledge. It didn't end well for him." "What did you do to him?" Catherine asked, her fists clenched at her sides. Vincent smiled, that same cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Thomas tried to break our arrangement. I simply enforced the terms." He moved closer, circling Catherine like a predator. "Just as I'll enforce them with you in 3 months' time, and with Elizabeth after that, and Margaret, and finally, little Josephine." "The pact says 1 daughter from each generation," Catherine countered. "Read more carefully, dear goddaughter. The pact requires 4 daughters from a single generation to complete the circle. Your father conveniently provided exactly that. And then? Then the Romero debt is paid, and I move on to another family in need of assistance." Vincent ran a finger along the spine of a book. "Of course, by then, there won't be any Romeros left to enjoy their freedom." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. "You're not human." Vincent laughed, the sound echoing off the library walls. "I'm much older and much hungrier than any human, Catherine, and I've waited a very long time for you and your sisters. As he spoke, his face seemed to shift subtly, the skin stretching too tight over his cheekbones, his eyes growing larger and more luminous. "Sunday's baptism will proceed as planned," he said, his voice taking on a strange, resonant quality. "And in 3 months I'll come for you, then your sisters one by one, just as I've done with Romero daughters for 3 generations. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Don't try anything foolish, Catherine. Your father already made that mistake. I'd hate to see history repeat itself." After he left, Catherine remained in the library, her mind racing. Vincent knew she was investigating. He was watching her, probably had been all along. They couldn't wait until Sunday. Josephine's baptism would mark her as his, just as Catherine and her other sisters had been marked. They had to leave tonight, and they had to take the means of breaking the pact with them. Dusk settled over Savannah, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Catherine moved through the house with forced casualness, smiling at the servants, chatting with her sisters at dinner. Vincent dined with them, his presence like a shadow at the table, his eyes rarely leaving Catherine. "I've been thinking," Eliza said as the dessert was served, her voice only slightly tremulous. "Perhaps we should have a small gathering after Josephine's baptism. Just family and close friends." "An excellent idea," Vincent agreed, dabbing his lips with a napkin. "I've already taken the liberty of inviting a few business associates, men who might be interested in the Romero shipping interests." Catherine caught her mother's alarmed glance. "Business associates at a child's baptism celebration?" Vincent smiled. "The world turns on such connections, my dear. Your father understood that." He turned to Eliza. "Speaking of business, I'll need to review some documents in Thomas's study tonight. I hope you don't mind if I work late." "Of course not," Eliza murmured. Catherine understood the message. Vincent would be awake, moving about the house. Their escape would be that much more difficult. After dinner, Catherine helped put the younger girls to bed, whispering to Elizabeth as she tucked in Josephine. "Midnight. Be ready." Elizabeth nodded, almost imperceptibly. In her room, Catherine packed a small valise with essentials. She changed into a dark traveling dress and sturdy boots. Under her pillow, she placed the silver dagger and vial of oil she had retrieved from the library hiding place. The original pact document was folded inside a book in her bag. At 11, the house grew quiet. Catherine sat by her window, watching the moon rise over the oak trees. From her vantage point, she could see a light still burning in her father's study. Vincent was awake, as promised. At 11:30, she slipped from her room and made her way to Margaret's bedroom. The 15-year-old was already dressed, sitting on her bed with wide, frightened eyes. "Catherine, what's happening?" she whispered. "I'll explain later. We need to leave quietly. Go to Elizabeth's room and wait for me there." Next, Catherine went to her mother's chamber. Eliza was awake, dressed in a simple traveling outfit. "You know?" Catherine asked. Eliza nodded. "I've known this day might come since your father disappeared. I've prepared." She showed Catherine a small bag containing jewelry and banknotes. "Enough to start somewhere new." "Vincent's still awake," Catherine warned. "The cook left him a brandy before retiring. I added laudanum to it." Eliza's eyes were hard with determination. Not enough to kill, just enough to dull his senses. Catherine felt a surge of pride for her mother. "We leave at midnight. Elizabeth's room." By 5 minutes to midnight, they had gathered. Catherine, Eliza, Elizabeth, Margaret and little Josephine, drowsy but quiet in Elizabeth's arms. Catherine had retrieved the dagger, oil and pact document. "We'll go down the back stairs and through the kitchen," Catherine whispered. "There's a carriage waiting on Whitaker Street, a friend of father's who owes him a favor." They moved through the darkened house like ghosts, each footfall carefully placed to avoid the creaking floorboards. As they passed the study, Catherine glanced inside. Vincent was slumped in a chair, a glass of brandy half empty beside him. The laudanum had worked. They reached the kitchen without incident. As Eliza eased open the back door, Catherine felt a sudden chill, as if a cold wind had swept through the room. "Leaving so soon?" Vincent stood in the doorway to the dining room, his tall figure eerily elongated in the shadows. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his mouth— Catherine had to stifle a gasp. His teeth had elongated into sharp points, his jaw distended to accommodate them. "The laudanum was a clever touch," he said, his voice distorted around those terrible teeth. "Unfortunately for you, I don't process such things the way humans do." Eliza pushed the girls behind her. "Run!" she shouted. "Catherine, take them and go." Catherine hesitated, torn between fleeing with her sisters and staying with her mother. Vincent moved with inhuman speed, crossing the kitchen in a blur. He grabbed Eliza by the throat, lifting her effortlessly. "Did you think you could break our pact so easily?" he hissed. "Your husband tried. See how well that ended for him." Catherine reached into her bag, her fingers closing around the silver dagger. "Let her go!" Vincent turned his glowing eyes on Catherine. "You found your father's little toy." He smiled, revealing more of those needle-sharp teeth. "Do you think you can use it better than he did?" Catherine drew the dagger, its silver blade catching the moonlight streaming through the kitchen window. "Elizabeth, take the girls and run, now!" Elizabeth, clutching Josephine, grabbed Margaret's hand and fled through the back door into the night. Vincent laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "They won't get far. The pact binds them to me. I can find a Romero daughter anywhere." He released Eliza, who collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Then he turned his full attention to Catherine. "Your father learned what happens when someone tries to break a blood pact," Vincent said, advancing slowly. "Would you like to see what became of him?" As he spoke, his form seemed to shift and blur, his limbs elongating, his face stretching into something less and less human. Catherine raised the dagger, her hand trembling. "By blood, it was sealed," she began, remembering her father's words. Vincent hissed, a sound like steam escaping a kettle. "You'll need more than words, girl." He lunged at her, inhumanly fast. Catherine slashed with the dagger, feeling it connect with something that wasn't quite flesh. Vincent howled, a sound that shattered the kitchen windows. Catherine stumbled backward, the dagger still clutched in her hand. There was something black and viscous on the blade. Not blood, but something darker, older. "You'll pay for that," Vincent snarled, clutching a wound on his arm that oozed the same black substance. Catherine fumbled in her bag for the pact document, her eyes never leaving Vincent's distorted form. Her fingers closed around the parchment. "By blood it was sealed," she repeated, louder this time. "By blood it is broken." Vincent lunged again. This time Eliza intercepted him, throwing herself between the creature and her daughter. Vincent's elongated fingers, now more like claws, raked across Eliza's back, tearing through her dress and into the flesh beneath. She screamed, collapsing to the floor. "Mother!" Catherine cried. Eliza looked up at her, blood seeping from the wounds on her back. "Finish it," she gasped. "For your sisters." Catherine unfolded the pact document with shaking hands. She uncorked the vial of blessed oil and poured it over the silver blade, which began to glow with an unearthly light. Vincent was hunched over now, his form shifting rapidly between human and something else, something with too many joints, too many teeth, eyes that glowed like embers in the darkened kitchen. "You can't break it," he hissed. "The price is too high." Catherine pressed the blade to her palm and cut, wincing at the sharp pain. Blood welled up, bright red in the moonlight. "I release you from your claim," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I sever our bond." She pressed her bleeding palm to the pact document. The parchment seemed to absorb her blood, the ink lines glowing red where the blood touched them. Vincent screamed, a sound not meant to come from a human throat. His body contorted, twisting in on itself, as if some invisible force was compressing him. "You don't know what you've done," he shrieked. "The protection ends with the pact. Everything your grandfather built, everything your father preserved, it all collapses now." Catherine stood firm, watching as Vincent Hargrove, or the thing that had used that name, began to dissolve, his form becoming less solid with each passing second. "Some prices are worth paying," she said. thinking of her sisters fleeing into the night, of her mother bleeding on the kitchen floor, of her father who had tried and failed to do what she was now accomplishing. The Romero daughters are free. With a final inhuman wail, Vincent Hargrove disintegrated, collapsing into a pile of black ash on the kitchen floor. A wind from nowhere scattered the remains, leaving nothing behind but the lingering scent of something ancient and rotten. Catherine dropped to her knees beside her mother, pressing a kitchen towel to the wounds on her back. "You did it," Eliza whispered, her face pale from blood loss. "You broke the pact." "We need to get you to a doctor," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "Find your sisters first," Eliza insisted. "Make sure they're safe." Catherine nodded, helping her mother to a chair. She wrapped Eliza's wounds as best she could, then hurried to the back door. Outside, the night was quiet. The moon shone down on the garden, illuminating three figures huddled beneath the old oak tree, Elizabeth, Margaret, and little Josephine, waiting for their mother and sister. "It's over," Catherine called to them. "He's gone." As her sisters ran to her, Catherine looked back at the Romero mansion, its windows dark except for the kitchen where her injured mother waited. Vincent's final words echoed in her mind. "The protection ends with the pact. Everything your grandfather built, everything your father preserved, it all collapses now." Whatever that meant, they would face it together, as a family. The Romero daughters were free at last. The week following Vincent Hargrove's destruction brought changes to the Romero household that Catherine could never have anticipated. By Monday morning, news had spread through Savannah's business community that the Romero shipping empire was in trouble. By Wednesday, creditors were knocking at their door, demanding immediate payment of loans that had mysteriously come due all at once. "It's as he said," Eliza murmured, reviewing the financial documents spread across the dining room table. Her back was heavily bandaged, and she moved with pain, but her mind remained sharp. The protection is gone. All these years, Vincent was keeping our creditors at bay, ensuring our businesses thrived. Catherine frowned, examining a bank statement. These loans date back decades, some to grandfather's time. Vincent's influence extended far, Eliza said. Now that he's gone, all the deferred debts are coming due at once. The Romero mansion, once a symbol of the family's prosperity, now felt like a mausoleum. Servants whispered in corners, wondering if their positions were secure. Tradesmen who had once offered unlimited credit now demanded cash payments. Even the Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees seemed more funereal than picturesque. "What will happen to us?" Elizabeth asked that evening as the sisters gathered in Catherine's bedroom. At 19, she was old enough to understand the gravity of their financial situation. Catherine looked at her sisters, Elizabeth poised and worried, Margaret defiant despite her fear, and Josephine blissfully unaware as she played with her doll on the floor. "We'll manage," Catherine said with more confidence than she felt. "We're Romeros. We've faced worse than financial trouble." "Have we?" Margaret asked, her 15-year-old voice cracking slightly. "We've been protected all our lives, even if that protection came with a terrible price." Catherine couldn't argue with that. The family's wealth had cushioned them from hardship, but it had been built on a foundation of dark promises. Now that foundation was crumbling. The next morning, Mr. Hadley from the First National Bank arrived, his face grim beneath his bowler hat. "Mrs. Romero," he said, standing awkwardly in the parlor, "I regret to inform you that the bank must call in all outstanding loans to the Romero estate. The board of directors met yesterday and—" He trailed off, unable to meet Eliza's eyes. "And Mr. Hargrove is no longer there to intervene," Eliza finished for him. Mr. Hadley adjusted his spectacles nervously. "Yes, quite. His absence from our last meeting was noticed. There are rumors he has left town permanently." "You could say that," Catherine murmured. "The total amount due is substantial," Mr. Hadley continued, presenting a document to Eliza. "If payment cannot be made within 30 days, I'm afraid foreclosure proceedings will begin." After he left, Eliza sank into a chair, her face pale. "We don't have even a tenth of this amount in ready capital." Catherine took the document, her eyes widening at the figure. "We could sell some of the shipping interests." "Who would buy them?" Eliza asked. "Without Vincent's influence, our ships have lost cargo contracts. The warehouse on River Street is nearly empty." Catherine paced the parlor, thinking. Father must have had contingency plans. He was trying to break free from Vincent for years before he disappeared. "If he did, he never shared them with me," Eliza said. "Our marriage was complicated by the pact. There were things Thomas kept from me, thinking to protect me." That night, Catherine returned to the library, searching through her father's papers with renewed purpose. If Thomas Romero had been planning to break free from Vincent's influence, surely he would have prepared for the financial consequences. She found nothing in the obvious places, his business ledgers, correspondence, or personal journals. Discouraged, she sat in his chair behind the massive oak desk, running her fingers along the worn leather armrests where his hands had rested countless times. "What were you planning, Father?" she whispered to the empty room. Her fingers caught on something beneath the armrest, a small irregularity in the leather. Examining it more closely, she found a tiny seam, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. Catherine pressed it, and with a soft click, a small compartment opened in the underside of the armrest. Inside was a key unlike any she'd seen before, bronze, with an intricate pattern of interconnected circles on its head. Catherine turned it over in her palm, wondering what it might open. Not a door in the house. She knew all those keys. Not a desk drawer or cabinet. Those used smaller, simpler keys. Then she remembered something. A conversation overheard years ago between her father and Vincent when she was supposed to be in bed, but had snuck down to the library for a book. "The vault beneath St. John's is secure," her father had said. "No one needs to know about it." "Except us," Vincent had replied. "Partners in all things, Thomas. Remember that." St. John's Cathedral stood on Lafayette Square, just a few blocks from the Romero mansion. The family had attended services there for generations, and Eduardo Romero had been one of its principal benefactors. The next morning, Catherine dressed in her plainest outfit and walked to the cathedral. The massive Gothic structure was quiet on a weekday, with only a few parishioners lighting candles or kneeling in prayer. Father Daniels, the elderly priest who had baptized all the Romero daughters, was arranging flowers at the altar. He smiled when he saw Catherine. "Miss Romero, what a pleasant surprise. I was saddened to hear about Mr. Hargrove's departure. Such a dedicated godfather to you girls." Catherine forced a smile. "Yes. Quite unexpected. And poor Josephine's baptism now postponed again. Well, these things happen for a reason, I suppose." "Father Daniels," Catherine said, changing the subject, "I was wondering about the cathedral's history. My grandfather was involved in its expansion, wasn't he?" The priest's face brightened. "Indeed. Eduardo Romero funded the new transept and the crypt beneath it. A very generous man, your grandfather." "The crypt," Catherine repeated carefully. "I've never been down there." "Few have," Father Daniel said. "It's sealed most of the time. Only opened for special occasions or for families who have interment rights, like the Romeros." "Precisely. Your grandfather has a place there, though he's buried in Bonaventure Cemetery with the rest of your family." Catherine fingered the bronze key in her pocket. "Would it be possible for me to see the crypt? For family research?" Father Daniels hesitated. "Well, it's not customary without a specific purpose." "Please, Father," Catherine pressed. "My mother is considering having my father declared legally dead, since it's been 7 years since his disappearance. We're reviewing all family matters." The mention of Thomas Romero softened the priest's expression. "I understand. Very well, let me find the key." "Actually," Catherine said, producing the bronze key from her pocket, "I believe I already have it. My father left it among his effects." Father Daniels examined the key with surprise. "Indeed you do. That's the family key to your grandfather's section of the crypt. I didn't realize Thomas had one." He led Catherine through the cathedral to a small door beside the altar, half hidden behind a tapestry. Stone steps descended into darkness. "I'll wait up here," Father Daniel said, lighting a lantern for her. "Take your time, but please don't disturb anything. Some of the older sections are quite fragile." The crypt was larger than Catherine had expected, a labyrinth of narrow corridors lined with stone sarcophagi and wall niches. The air was cool and smelled of stone and ancient incense. Her lantern cast dancing shadows as she moved deeper into the underground chamber. Following Father Daniel's directions, she found the Romero section at the far end of the crypt. A wrought-iron gate bore the family crest, a ship above a rising sun. Catherine inserted the bronze key into the lock, and with a grinding sound that echoed through the crypt, the gate swung open. Inside was a small chamber with several wall niches, most empty. On a stone shelf against the back wall sat a metal box about the size of a bread box, secured with a lock that matched her key. Catherine's hands trembled as she unlocked the box. Inside, she found stacks of banknotes, gold coins, and several velvet pouches that clinked with the unmistakable sound of gemstones. Beneath these was a leather folio containing property deeds, stock certificates, and bank drafts, all in Thomas Romero's name, not the family business. A letter lay atop these documents, sealed with her father's signet ring and addressed simply, "For my daughters when the time comes." Catherine broke the seal with shaking fingers and read, "My beloved daughters, if you are reading this, then I have failed to break the pact with Vincent Hargrove, but you have succeeded where I could not. I always feared this day would come, when the protection ends and the debts come due. What you hold in your hands is your inheritance, kept separate from the Romero family business. For years, I've quietly diverted a portion of our profits into these holdings: property in Charleston, mining interests in Pennsylvania, railway stock in the West, all purchased under my personal name, unknown to Vincent or the creditors who will surely descend once his influence is gone. The Romero shipping empire may fall, but you will not fall with it. The mansion, the business, the Savannah properties, let them go. They were built on a bargain I came to regret, tainted by the price paid in Romero daughters across 3 generations. Begin anew, my children. Take what I have saved for you and build something untainted by darkness. My only request is that you stay together and protect one another, as I failed to protect you. With all my love, your father, Thomas Romero, November 10th, 1904. Catherine clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Her father had known, had prepared for this very moment. He had given them a way forward, a chance at a new life, free from Vincent Hargrove's shadow. The Savannah Morning News announced the closure of Romero Shipping and Trade on October 1st, 1911. The article, positioned below the fold on page 3, noted the company's long history dating back to before the Civil War and speculated on financial mismanagement following Thomas Romero's disappearance 7 years prior. What the newspaper didn't report was that Catherine Romero, with her mother's blessing, had already sold the remaining viable assets to a competitor for a fraction of their previous worth. The grand mansion on Abercorn Street was in the process of being sold to a northern industrialist looking for a winter home in the south. The Romero women, meanwhile, had quietly relocated to Charleston, South Carolina, where Thomas Romero had purchased a modest but elegant townhouse on Church Street years earlier, one of the properties documented in the crypt's hidden cache. "It's smaller than what we're used to," Eliza observed as they toured the 3-story brick home for the first time. Her wounds had healed, leaving jagged scars across her back, but she stood straighter now, unburdened by the weight of the pact. "But it's ours," Catherine replied, "truly ours, with no darkness attached to it." Elizabeth and Margaret had enrolled in Charleston Ladies' Academy, while Josephine would begin at a small primary school the following week. As for Catherine, she had plans of her own. Thomas Romero's hidden assets had proven substantial, enough to provide comfort for the family and opportunity for the future. Among the documents in the metal box had been the deed to a small import business in Charleston, specializing in textiles and spices from the Mediterranean and Far East. Romero and daughters, Catherine said one evening in early November, presenting her mother and sisters with a newly painted sign for the storefront on King Street. Father established it 3 years before he disappeared, but it's been managed by a Mr. Collins since then. I've spoken with him, and he's willing to stay on while I learn the business. You intend to run it yourself? Eliza asked, surprised. Why not? Catherine replied. I've spent years studying Father's business ledgers. Elizabeth can join me when she finishes school, if she wishes. And Margaret has her heart set on medical college. This will help fund that dream. The new beginning Thomas Romero had provided was taking shape, yet shadows from Savannah still reached them. Letters arrived from former acquaintances, reporting strange occurrences at the old Romero mansion. Lights seen in vacant rooms, objects moving without explanation, the sound of weeping heard from empty corridors. The new owners are already speaking of selling, Elizabeth reported after corresponding with a friend who remained in Savannah. They claim the house is uninhabitable. Catherine was not surprised. The mansion had been built with Vincent Hargrove's money, blood money, tied to the pact that had claimed Romero daughters for generations. Whatever lingered there was beyond their concern now. More troubling were the dreams. Catherine had begun experiencing them shortly after their move to Charleston, vivid nightmares in which she found herself back in the Savannah house, wandering dark corridors while something with too many teeth and glowing eyes pursued her. She would wake gasping, her palm burning where she had cut it to break the pact. She wasn't alone. Elizabeth reported similar dreams, and even little Josephine had begun waking in the night, crying about the bad man with sharp teeth. It's just the adjustment to our new home, Eliza insisted. The memories will fade with time. But Catherine wasn't certain. Something felt unfinished, as if breaking the pact had left loose ends that were slowly weaving themselves back together. On crisp December morning, while reviewing inventory at the shop, Catherine received an unexpected visitor. Mr. Hadley, the bank manager from Savannah, stood awkwardly at the counter, twisting his hat in his hands. "Miss Romero," he said, his voice lower than usual. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I felt I should deliver this personally." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It was found in Mr. Hargrove's private vault at the bank. The instructions were to deliver it to you in the event of his absence for more than 3 months. Catherine stared at the package. "You've opened his vault?" "After 90 days without contact, yes. Bank policy." Mr. Hadley shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Romero, if I may speak frankly, there were items in that vault that dated back to the 1850s, personal effects that couldn't possibly have belonged to a man of Mr. Hargrove's age. And documents bearing his signature that were over 60 years old." Catherine said nothing, waiting. "The bank directors have agreed to seal the vault and speak no more of it," Hadley continued. "Some things are better left unexplained, but this," he nodded at the package, "this had your name on it, with explicit instructions." After he left, Catherine sat for a long time staring at the package before finally unwrapping it. Inside was a small wooden box carved with interconnected circles, the same pattern as on the bronze key to the cathedral crypt. A note was attached to the lid. "For Catherine Romero, upon the breaking of our arrangement. The pact is broken but not ended. What was bound for generations does not unravel in a single night. The hunger remains, seeking new vessels. Watch your sisters closely, especially the youngest, who was not properly marked. VH." With trembling fingers, Catherine opened the box. Inside lay a silver pendant on a delicate chain. The pendant was shaped like a teardrop, with a small red stone at its center that caught the light like a drop of blood. Also in the box was a yellowed page torn from a book, bearing an illustration of a creature with elongated limbs and too many teeth, its eyes hollow pools of darkness. Beneath it was written, "The Hungry One," which makes pacts with the desperate and feeds on their bloodline. It can be banished, but never destroyed, for it exists between worlds, always seeking a way back through the doors left open by those it has marked. Catherine closed the box with a snap, her heart racing. Vincent, or whatever he truly was, had prepared this message before his destruction, anticipating that Catherine might succeed where her father had failed. But what did it mean? Was the creature not truly gone? And what did it mean about Josephine not being properly marked? The child's baptism had never taken place. Unlike Catherine, Elizabeth and Margaret, Josephine had not been formally claimed by Vincent Hargrove as godfather. According to the pact document, the baptism was essential to the claiming. That night, Catherine examined her sleeping sisters one by one. Elizabeth and Margaret appeared peaceful, their breathing deep and regular, but when she entered Josephine's room, she found the child sitting upright in bed, staring at the window. "Josephine, what's wrong, darling?" The 4-year-old turned slowly, her eyes reflecting the moonlight with an unnatural gleam. "He's coming back," she whispered, in a voice not entirely her own. "He's found another way in." Catherine rushed to the bed, gathering her sister in her arms. "Who's coming back, Joe?" "The hungry man." Josephine's small body trembled. "He says I'm his way home, because I wasn't marked like you were." A chill ran down Catherine's spine. She thought of Vincent's note, "The hunger remains, seeking new vessels." "Watch your sisters closely, especially the youngest, who was not properly marked." Josephine had not been baptized. The ritual that had bound Catherine and her other sisters to Vincent had never been completed for the youngest Romero daughter. But instead of protecting her, this absence of marking had somehow left her vulnerable, a door left ajar for something hungry to push through. Christmas approached, bringing cold rains to Charleston and a steady stream of customers to Romero and daughters. Catherine threw herself into the business, using work to distract from her growing concern about Josephine. The child's behavior had become increasingly erratic, periods of eerie stillness followed by fits of temper unlike anything they had seen from her before. "It's the move," Eliza insisted when Catherine voiced her concerns. "She's young. The upheaval has affected her more than the rest of us." But Catherine wasn't convinced. Twice now she had caught Josephine speaking to an empty corner of her bedroom, carrying on one side of a conversation in whispers. When asked who she was talking to, the child would only say, "My friend who's coming soon." Ndazu on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, Catherine awoke to the sound of the front door closing. She sat up, listening to the grandfather clock in the hallway strike 3. The house was silent, except for the patter of rain against the windows. Something drew her to Josephine's room. The child's bed was empty, the covers thrown back. A cold draught whispered through the room, coming from the open window. Catherine's heart seemed to stop. She ran to the window, leaning out into the rain. Far below, a small figure in a white nightgown was walking down Church Street, heading toward the harbour. "Mother!" Catherine shouted, already pulling on her boots. "Elizabeth, wake up! Josephine is gone!" Minutes later, Catherine was racing through the rain-slicked streets, following the distant flash of white that appeared and disappeared among the shadows. Behind her, Elizabeth and Eliza were rousing neighbours, organising a search party. Margaret stayed behind in case Josephine returned. The cobblestone streets gleamed black in the rain. Charleston slept, unaware of the small drama unfolding in its darkened corridors. Catherine followed her sister's trail toward the waterfront, where tall ships creaked at their moorings and the smell of salt and rot permeated the air. She found Josephine standing at the end of a pier, her nightgown plastered to her tiny frame by the rain, her bare feet pale against the dark wood. The child was staring out at the harbour, where the running lights of a ship winked in the distance. "Josephine!" Catherine called, approaching slowly. "What are you doing out here, darling? You'll catch your death." The child turned, and Catherine faltered. Josephine's eyes reflected the distant lights with the same unnatural gleam Catherine had noticed in her bedroom. When she spoke, her voice had a strange, hollow quality. "He's coming on that ship," she said, pointing to the distant vessel. "He found a new body, but he needs me to be complete again. I'm the door." Catherine approached carefully, as one might a sleepwalker. "Who's coming, Joe?" The hungry one, Vincent. He always comes back. That's why the pact lasted so long. Grandfather knew he couldn't be destroyed, only appeased. The words coming from the 4-year-old's mouth chilled Catherine more than the December rain. She reached for her sister, but Josephine stepped back, dangerously close to the edge of the pier. "You broke the pact," the child said in that strange adult voice, "but some bonds can't be severed so easily. He marked you, Elizabeth and Margaret. But I was left unmarked, unclaimed, a vessel waiting to be filled." "You're not a vessel," Catherine said firmly, inching closer. "You're Josephine Romero, my sister. Whatever is speaking through you now, you don't belong to it." Something flickered in the child's eyes, a moment of recognition, of the real Josephine fighting to surface. "Catherine?" she whispered, her voice suddenly small and frightened. "I'm scared. He's in my dreams. He says he's coming back for all of us." Catherine lunged forward, catching Josephine just as the child's knees buckled. She lifted her sister into her arms, feeling how cold her skin was, how she trembled like a leaf in a storm. "Let's get you home," Catherine murmured, wrapping her coat around Josephine's shivering form. "Whatever is happening, we'll face it together. The Romero women protect each other now." As she carried Josephine back through the sleeping city, Catherine glanced over her shoulder at the harbour. The ship Josephine had pointed to was closer now, its running lights brighter against the stormy darkness. According to the harbour master's schedule, posted at Romero and Daughters, no ships were expected to dock that night. Yet there it was, drawing inexorably toward Charleston. Back at the townhouse, Eliza took charge of getting Josephine warm and dry, while Elizabeth dismissed the neighbours who had gathered for the search. Catherine pulled Margaret aside, sharing what had happened at the pier. She spoke like an adult, Catherine concluded, like she was channeling him. Margaret, despite her youth, had always been the most pragmatic of the sisters. At 15, she already spoke of studying medicine, of understanding the world through science rather than superstition. But even she looked troubled by Catherine's account. "The woman in New Orleans," Margaret said thoughtfully. "The one father consulted before he disappeared. She might know something about this." Catherine had almost forgotten that detail from their father's journal. "Marie Laveau," she murmured. "Father wrote that she recognized Vincent's description immediately, called him one of the hungry ones." "We should go to her," Margaret pressed. "Before that ship docks." Catherine shook her head. "New Orleans is days away by train. Whatever is happening with Josephine, we don't have that kind of time." She thought of the silver pendant in the wooden box Vincent had left for her, the teardrop with its blood-red stone, and the torn page with its warning. "It can be banished but never destroyed, for it exists between worlds, always seeking a way back through the doors left open by those it has marked, or those it hadn't marked." "There's something I need to check," Catherine said, heading for her bedroom where she had hidden the box. The pendant lay nestled on black velvet, the silver gleaming in the lamplight. Catherine lifted it carefully, half expecting it to burn her fingers. Instead, it felt oddly cold, as if it absorbed warmth rather than reflecting it. She returned to Josephine's room, where Eliza sat beside the bed, stroking the child's damp hair. Josephine had fallen into an uneasy sleep, her small face troubled even in repose. "Mother," Catherine said softly, "I need to show you something." In the hallway, she explained about Vincent's package and showed Eliza the pendant and the torn page. "You think this has something to do with Josephine's behavior?" Eliza asked, examining the pendant with suspicion. "I think Vincent, or whatever he truly was, isn't gone," Catherine replied. "I think he's finding his way back through Josephine because she wasn't properly marked by baptism." Eliza's face hardened. "Then we'll complete the baptism, not with Vincent as Godfather, but properly, in the church, with someone we trust." "It may not be that simple," Catherine warned. "The pact specified baptism followed by Vincent's claim. Just performing a standard christening might not be enough." "What are you suggesting?" Catherine held up the pendant. "This was meant for me. A message, a warning, maybe also a tool. Before Eliza could respond, a cry came from Josephine's room. They rushed back in to find the child thrashing in her bed, her eyes open but unseeing. "He's here," Josephine moaned. "The ship has docked. He's coming for me." Catherine moved to the bedside, the pendant clutched in her hand. "Joe, listen to me. Whatever is trying to reach you, you can fight it. We're here with you." Josephine's gaze fixed on the pendant, and she recoiled as if from a hot flame. "Take it away!" she shrieked in that adult voice that wasn't her own. "That binding stone will trap me." Catherine exchanged a glance with her mother. "A binding stone," she repeated. "That's what this is." Understanding dawned in Eliza's eyes. "Your father mentioned something similar once, a talisman that could contain spirits, prevent them from finding a host." Catherine looked down at the pendant, then at Josephine, who had pressed herself against the headboard, her eyes never leaving the silver teardrop. "I think I know what to do," Catherine said quietly. Dawn broke over Charleston, painting the rain-washed streets in pale gold. Catherine had not slept, keeping vigil beside Josephine's bed while the child alternated between fitful slumber and periods of distressing alertness, during which she spoke in voices not her own. Eliza had taken the pendant to a silversmith on King Street as soon as he opened, following Catherine's instructions. Elizabeth and Margaret tended to Josephine, using cool compresses when fever spiked and offering sips of water during moments of lucidity. Shortly before noon, a knock at the door announced a visitor. Catherine, bleary-eyed from her night's vigil, opened it to find a rail-thin black man in his 60s, dressed in the simple garb of a church deacon. "Miss Romero?" he asked, his voice deep and melodious. "I'm Deacon Isaiah Jackson, from Mother Emanuel AME. Your mother asked me to come." Catherine ushered him in, surprised. "Mother Emanuel? We attend St. Michael's." Deacon Jackson smiled, revealing a gold tooth among otherwise perfect white teeth. "Some problems require expertise beyond what St. Michael's can provide. Your mother explained about your sister. Did she explain everything?" Catherine asked skeptically. "About the entity attempting to possess the child?" "Yes." The deacon removed his hat, revealing close-cropped silver hair. "I've encountered such things before. Not often in Charleston, but more frequently in the Low Country, among the Gullah people, where old beliefs and older spirits still hold sway." Catherine studied him, uncertain. "How do you know my mother?" "I don't," he replied simply. "But I knew your father. He consulted me before his journey to New Orleans 7 years ago. I pointed him toward Marie Laveau, who knows more about hungry spirits than anyone living." This was unexpected. Thomas Romero had never mentioned a deacon from Mother Emanuel in his journals. But then there had been many pages missing, torn out, Catherine had always assumed, by her father himself to protect family secrets. "Can you help Josephine?" she asked. "Perhaps. With your mother's help and yours, and something to bind the spirit." He looked pointedly at Catherine's closed fist, where she clutched the pendant Eliza had retrieved from the silversmith an hour earlier. Catherine opened her hand. The pendant had been modified according to her instructions, now hanging from a fine silver chain, sized for a child, with a clasp that would be difficult to remove without assistance. Deacon Jackson nodded approvingly. "A binding stone. Very good. The entity will resist, of course. It won't want to be trapped." "What exactly is it?" Catherine asked as she led him upstairs to Josephine's room. "Vincent Hargrove was my godfather, but he wasn't human. Some call them hungry ones, others hollow men. They exist between worlds, feeding on human essence, emotions, experiences, potential. They make pacts with the desperate, offering wealth or power or protection in exchange for a claim on their descendants. But why? To anchor themselves in our world. They need human vessels to fully manifest here, to feed properly. Your godfather had a claim on you and your sisters, but something happened, yes? The pact was broken?" Catherine nodded. "I used a ritual my father had discovered, silver dagger, blessed oil, blood freely given." Deacon Jackson made a sound of approval. "That would banish such a creature back to its own realm, but not destroy it. These entities are persistent. If they find another way in, an unmarked vessel like your sister, they will take it. They had reached Josephine's door. Inside, the child lay still on the bed, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. Eliza sat beside her, holding her hand, while Elizabeth and Margaret stood by the window, whispering together. "He's here," Deacon Jackson said softly, his gaze fixed on Josephine. Inside her, but not fully, she's fighting him. Catherine felt a surge of pride for her youngest sister. Even at 4, Josephine had the Romero strength. "What do we do?" she asked. "We perform a binding ritual," the deacon replied. "Not so different from a baptism, but with a different purpose. Instead of marking her as his, we'll use the pendant to draw the entity out and trap it." "Will it hurt her?" Eliza asked, rising from the bed. "It will be difficult," Jackson admitted. "The entity will resist. But children are resilient, and your daughter has strong blood." They cleared the room, leaving only Catherine, Eliza, and Deacon Jackson with Josephine. At Jackson's instruction, they arranged candles at the 4 corners of the bed and drew the curtains, casting the room in shadows broken only by the dancing flames. "The binding stone," Jackson said, extending his hand to Catherine. She gave him the pendant, which he held up to the light, examining the red stone at its center. "A good choice," he murmured. "Blood jasper. Receptive to spirit energy." He returned the pendant to Catherine. "You must be the one to place it on her. You broke the pact. You have a connection to both the child and the entity." Catherine approached the bed, the silver chain dangling from her fingers. Josephine lay motionless, her face waxy and pale, her chest barely moving with each shallow breath. "Now," Deacon Jackson instructed. As Catherine moved to place the chain around Josephine's neck, the child's eyes snapped open. They were no longer the soft brown of Josephine Romero, but a luminous gray, the color of wet slate. Vincent Hargrove's eyes. "Catherine," the child said in a voice that chilled the room. "My favorite goddaughter, always so clever, so determined, just like your father." Catherine's hands trembled, but she continued to lower the pendant toward Josephine's neck. "You're not welcome here, Vincent. Leave my sister alone." The child's face contorted into a smile that was all wrong on her innocent features. "But she invited me in. The unmarked one, the open door. So easy to whisper into her dreams, to guide her thoughts." "Bind him," Deacon Jackson urged. "The pendant! Quickly!" Josephine's small hands shot up with unnatural strength, grabbing Catherine's wrists. "You think a trinket can hold me? I who have existed for centuries, making pacts with desperate men like your grandfather." "You made a mistake," Catherine said, struggling against the inhuman grip. "You left us the means to trap you." Vincent's laughter emerged from Josephine's throat, a sound like breaking glass. "I left you a test, to see if you were worthy of being my vessel instead of this child. You've always been my true target, Catherine, from the moment of your baptism." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. "What? Why do you think I cultivated your family for 3 generations? Building a bloodline strong enough to house me permanently? The pact was never about claiming Romero daughters for servants. It was about creating the perfect vessel. You." The revelation staggered Catherine, but she maintained her grip on the pendant. "You failed. I broke the pact. You delayed the inevitable." Vincent's voice grew stronger, his control over Josephine more complete. The child's face was changing subtly, her features shifting to accommodate something older, something hungry. "I'll take this one for now. She's young, malleable. In time, she'll come to accept me, and then I'll come for you again, and your sisters." "Now, Catherine," Deacon Jackson commanded, his own hands moving in intricate patterns as he spoke words in a language Catherine didn't recognize. With a surge of determination, Catherine broke free from Josephine's grip and slipped the pendant over her head. The moment the blood jasper touched the child's skin, a shriek tore from her throat, a sound no human child could make. Josephine's body arched off the bed, suspended by some invisible force. The candle flames shot upward, stretching toward the ceiling. The temperature in the room plummeted, frost forming on the windows despite the mild December day outside. "Hold her down!" Jackson shouted over the unearthly wailing. Catherine and Eliza pressed Josephine's shoulders to the mattress, fighting against the supernatural strength that threatened to throw them off. The pendant glowed against the child's chest, the red stone pulsing like a heart. Deacon Jackson continued his incantation, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "The binding stone draws him out," he explained between phrases, "traps the essence, but he must go willingly or be driven out completely." "How do we drive him out?" Catherine demanded, struggling to maintain her hold on Josephine. "By giving him no choice," Jackson replied grimly. "By making the vessel uninhabitable." Before Catherine could ask what he meant, Josephine's body went rigid. Her eyes, still that unnatural grey, widened in what looked like fear. "No," she whispered in Vincent's voice. "You wouldn't dare. She's just a child." Deacon Jackson's expression hardened. "You underestimate a mother's love, hungry one, and a sister's determination." He turned to Catherine and Eliza. "The binding stone works, but he's too strong to be pulled out completely. He needs incentive." "What kind of incentive?" Eliza asked, her voice steady despite the horror unfolding before her. Jackson met her gaze directly. Pain, enough to make him flee rather than endure it. "No," Catherine protested. "There must be another way." There isn't," Jackson said solemnly. "The entity has taken root too deeply. It must be made to choose to leave." Eliza's face had gone pale, but her eyes were resolute. "What must we do?" "Salt," Jackson replied. "Blessed salt on the tongue. It burns these creatures, makes the vessel inhospitable." Catherine recoiled at the thought of causing Josephine pain, but the alternative, leaving her sister possessed by the thing that had haunted their family for generations, was unthinkable. Jackson produced a small pouch from his pocket. "This is salt from the marshes, blessed at Mother Emmanuel during 7 consecutive Sunday services. A few grains on the tongue will be enough." Josephine, or the thing controlling her, thrashed more violently on the bed, the pendant glowing brighter against her chest. "You'll regret this," she hissed in Vincent's voice. "I'll find another way back, another vessel. You can't escape me, Catherine. We're bound beyond any pact." "Hold her mouth open," Jackson instructed, pouring a small amount of salt into his palm. Catherine hesitated, torn between love for her sister and fear of hurting her. Eliza had no such hesitation. With firm gentleness, she pried Josephine's jaw open, holding it despite the child's supernatural strength. "Now," she commanded Jackson. The deacon sprinkled a few grains of the blessed salt onto Josephine's tongue. The effect was immediate and terrifying. A sound like 1,000 screaming voices erupted from the child's throat. Her body convulsed, the pendant at her throat blazing with crimson light. The windows of the bedroom shattered outward, sending glass shards raining into the street below. Then, abruptly, silence fell. Josephine's body went limp on the bed, her eyes closed, her breathing deep and regular, the peaceful sleep of a child. The pendant, still around her neck, had changed. The red stone at its center was now black, like a piece of coal. "It's done," Deacon Jackson said quietly, wiping sweat from his brow. "The hungry one is trapped in the binding stone." Catherine touched the pendant carefully. It was cold to the touch, almost painfully so. How can something so small contain him? The stone doesn't contain his physical form, but his essence, his connection to our world. Jackson slumped into a chair, suddenly looking his age. The ritual has drained him, trapped him. He cannot reach beyond the stone now. "And Josephine?" Eliza asked, stroking her daughter's hair. "She will recover. Children are remarkably resilient. She may not remember much of what happened." "What do we do with this?" Catherine asked, indicating the pendant with its now black stone. "Guard it," Jackson said seriously. "The binding is strong but not permanent. Over time, years, perhaps decades, he will gather strength again. When the stone begins to regain its red color, you'll know he's growing stronger. And then you must bind him again, or find a more permanent solution. The deacon rose shakily to his feet. Marie Laveau in New Orleans might know of such methods. Your father was on the right path when he sought her counsel. After Jackson left, promising to return the next day to check on Josephine, Catherine sat beside her sister's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. The pendant, with its black stone, lay against the child's nightgown, a visible reminder of the entity trapped inside. Elizabeth and Margaret joined her, the 4 Romero women forming a protective circle around their youngest. "Will he ever truly be gone?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Catherine thought of Vincent's words. "You can't escape me, Catherine. We're bound beyond any pact." "I don't know," she admitted, "but whatever happens, we'll face it together. Father gave us the means to start anew, free from the old debts, and we've proven we can fight back." As twilight settled over Charleston, Josephine stirred, her eyes fluttering open, warm brown once more, with no trace of Vincent's unnatural grey. She looked confused, then focused on Catherine's face. "I had bad dreams," she murmured sleepily. "They're over now," Catherine assured her, squeezing her small hand. "Just dreams." But even as she spoke the comforting words, Catherine's gaze fell on the pendant with its black stone. She knew the truth. Vincent Hargrove, or whatever ancient hungry thing had used that name, was not gone, merely contained. And one day, perhaps in her lifetime, or perhaps in some future generation, the Romero women would have to face him again. For now, though, they were safe. The pact was broken, if not ended. The 4 Romero daughters had survived, their futures their own to shape. Catherine touched the scar on her palm, the mark left by the ritual that had banished Vincent the first time. Some prices were worth paying for freedom. Some battles worth fighting, even knowing they might need to be fought again. Outside, night fell over Charleston, stars appearing in the clear winter sky. The ship that had arrived in the storm was gone from the harbor, as if it had never existed. In the Romero townhouse on Church Street, a family slept peacefully for the first time in generations, untroubled by the weight of an ancient bargain. For now, at least, the hunger had been contained. Spring arrived in Charleston, bringing soft breezes laden with the scent of jasmine and magnolia. The Romero women had settled into their new life, their Savannah past receding like a tide. Romero and Daughters had established itself as a respectable import business, with Catherine's keen mind for commerce quickly earning the respect of the city's merchants. Josephine had recovered completely from her ordeal, with no apparent memory of the entity that had tried to possess her. The pendant with its black stone remained around her neck, concealed beneath her clothing, a precaution that Catherine insisted upon despite Eliza's concerns about the constant reminder. "She doesn't remember, Catherine," Eliza had argued. "Perhaps it would be better to lock it away somewhere secure." But Catherine had been adamant. "Jackson said the binding is tied to her. The pendant must stay with Josephine until we find a more permanent solution." On a warm April morning, as dogwood blossoms drifted like snow along Church Street, a letter arrived from New Orleans. It bore no return address, but the handwriting was distinctive, flowing and elegant, with unusual flourishes. Catherine opened it in the privacy of her office at the shop, her heart quickening as she read, "Miss Romero, word has reached me of your family's struggle with the hungry one who called himself Vincent Hargrove. Your father sought my counsel 7 years ago, and now I extend the same offer to you. The binding stone is a temporary measure. Already the entity gathers strength within it. In time, perhaps years, perhaps less, it will break free unless more permanent steps are taken. I possess knowledge of a ritual that can banish such creatures permanently, severing their connection to our world. But it requires items difficult to obtain and carries significant risk. If you wish to learn more, come to New Orleans. Ask for Marie at the house on St. Anne Street. Come alone and bring the binding stone." With respect for your family's courage, M.L. Catherine read the letter twice more before folding it carefully and placing it in her desk drawer. Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans, if the stories were to be believed. The woman who had recognized Vincent's nature immediately and had given Thomas Romero the tools to attempt breaking the pact. Now she was offering Catherine a more permanent solution. That evening, Catherine examined the pendant around Josephine's neck as she tucked her sister into bed. The stone remained black, but when she looked closely, she could see a faint reddish tinge at its core, like an ember refusing to die. Jackson had been right. The entity was already gathering strength. "Does it bother you, Joe?" Catherine asked, touching the pendant gently. "This necklace?" Josephine shook her head. "I like it. It keeps the bad dreams away." "What bad dreams?" The child's expression grew serious, her 4-year-old face suddenly appearing older. "About the hungry man. He used to whisper to me at night, telling me to do things, but he's quiet now. The necklace makes him sleep." A chill ran down Catherine's spine. So Josephine did remember, at least on some level. "If he ever starts whispering again, you'll tell me right away, won't you?" Josephine nodded solemnly. "Promise." After her sister fell asleep, Catherine sat in the parlor with Elizabeth and Margaret, sharing Marie Laveau's letter. Eliza had retired early, complaining of a headache, a frequent occurrence since their move to Charleston. "New Orleans," Elizabeth said thoughtfully. "It's a long journey." "And potentially dangerous," Margaret added. "This Marie Laveau practices voodoo, if the stories are true. Is that something we want to involve ourselves with?" Catherine sighed. "We're already involved with forces beyond our understanding. Vincent wasn't human. Whatever possessed Josephine wasn't natural. If Marie Laveau knows how to end this permanently, I have to try. Then we'll all go," Elizabeth decided. "The letter says to come alone. Since when do Romero women follow instructions from strangers?" Margaret asked, with a hint of their father's determination in her voice. Catherine smiled despite herself. "The business needs tending. Mother isn't well enough to travel, and Josephine is too young for such a journey." "I can manage the business," Elizabeth offered. "I've been learning the accounts, and Mr. Collins is trustworthy." "And I can care for Mother and Josephine," Margaret added. Catherine looked at her sisters, feeling a surge of pride. They had all grown in the months since escaping Savannah, Elizabeth more confident, Margaret more determined, little Josephine recovering her childish joy. "Very well," she conceded. "I'll go to New Orleans. If Marie Laveau truly knows how to end this threat permanently, it's worth any risk." 2 weeks later, Catherine stood on the deck of a steamer bound for New Orleans, watching Charleston recede into the distance. The pendant, with its binding stone, was secure in a velvet pouch around her neck, removed from Josephine only after Jackson had performed a ritual to transfer the binding temporarily. "The entity is still connected to your sister," he had warned, "but it will remain trapped in the stone while separated from her. Be cautious, Miss Romero. New Orleans harbors old magic and older dangers." As the coastline disappeared from view, Catherine touched the pouch containing the pendant. Inside, she knew, Vincent Hargrove, or the hungry entity that had used that name, waited. Diminished, but not destroyed. Contained, but not conquered. Her father had tried and failed to free the family from its influence. Now it fell to Catherine to finish what Thomas Romero had begun, to break not just the pact, but the cycle of hunger and claiming that had haunted the Romero daughters for generations. The ship cut through the waves, carrying her toward New Orleans and whatever secrets Marie Laveau possessed. Behind her, Charleston grew smaller, the new life she and her sisters had built receding with it. Ahead lay uncertainty and danger, but also the possibility of true freedom. Catherine took a deep breath of salt air, feeling the weight of the binding stone against her chest. Whatever happened in New Orleans, she would face it with the same determination that had allowed her to break the pact in the first place. The Hungry One had underestimated the Romero daughters once. It would not make that mistake again, but neither would Catherine underestimate the creature that had claimed her godfather's identity and tried to possess her sister. This time, the confrontation would be final. This time, the hunger would be ended forever. As the steamer sailed westward, Catherine Romero stood firm at the railing, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Behind her lay the past with its dark bargains and blood pacts. Before her, a future not yet written, one that she and her sisters would determine for themselves, free from ancient hungers and generations-old debts. The binding stone pulsed once against her chest, as if in acknowledgement of the coming reckoning. Catherine smiled grimly. The final chapter in the story of the Romero daughters and their godfather's claim had yet to be written. But she intended to ensure it ended on her terms, not his.